Welcome to today's discussion on the indigenous wool of India. And just to set the context, CFP has been working on wool with different partners across the country for the past couple of years. And we have also done a presentation of the Desi-owned products once with Rangsutra in December, and there's another ongoing presentation with Okai right now. So, and this discussion is part of our Desi-owned presentation, and just to also give a background of how much wool India produces about 40 million kilos of wool, about 80% of which is discarded, and this is largely something that has shifted in the past couple of decades, where the shepherds, they have lost an important source of earning, which was wool. And we have been trying, and most of our panelists here, they have been trying to work with wool and see how the indigenous wool and the woolen craft products can find a market, and the shepherds, they can still continue to earn from wool, and so forth. Meera is going to be the Meera and we will try to moderate the discussion. Meera has worked very closely with indigenous fibers. She was the director at Khamir when the Kala Cotton project, the well-known Kala Cotton project, took off, and then she has been associated with the wool initiative at Khamir and CFP both. And Meera and we together did a study of the wool economies across India, and maybe we'll have a chance to speak about briefly about our findings. So with that background, can I request our panelists to give a brief introduction about themselves? Can we start with you, Sumita?
Hello, everyone. My internet connection says it's a bit unstable, so I'm wondering if you can hear me.
We can, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good to hear that. Because I got this message saying your internet connection is unstable. So hello, I'm Shumita, and I've been working with farmers, many of whom have been our shepherds for the last, I don't know, I've lost count, 35 years or something. And initially with the Urmul Trust in Bikaner, which is a hub of wool, and recently for the last 15 years with Rangsutra, which is a community-owned organization of artisans, and all of whom are also farmers. They are not just artisans; they also practice farming once a year. One crop they take, and many of them are also keep small animals like sheep. So that's my introduction. Next,
Sushma.
Thanks,
yeah. Sushma.
Hello, everyone. I am Sushma, as Shaurya mentioned, and I live and work in Kutch. I've been associated with this initiative of trying to revitalize the Desi-owned. That interest and passion for it got triggered through an exhibition that I'm associated with, Living Lightly, which kind of brings out the life worlds of pastoralists. And through that research, it became very clear that we were having a huge issue, that we have one of the largest populations of sheep, and pastoralists across are throwing their wool. And that started triggering a certain interest and inquiry, and well, that has just stayed. So I've been associated with Khamir and CFP, and they're all friends here on this Zoom call. Meera is a very, very old and my closest friend. Shumita is an equally old friend, and we go back many, many years. Jen is a new gem we discovered 3 years ago and has really taught us a lot on this whole bull subject. And Himanshu, of course, has been working with Khamir on the Kala Cotton. So Parag, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks, Sushma. Parag, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Parag. I stay in Delhi with my family. I hail from Assam. I've been in Delhi for 7 years now. I come from a consulting background. I have worked with organizations like Caterpillar, Coca-Cola, Harley, a few organizations to name a few. I joined IKEA back in 2014 in textile carpets, and uh, we work a lot with wool. I think we have been sourcing carpets. I mean, carpets was one of the first categories that we started here in India, and we have been working with suppliers in Bikaner, a few suppliers in Bikaner, and we have been working a lot over the last 3 years over the chain of custody and the animal welfare when it comes to the wool and wool products. So I'm very happy to be here to learn more about how we can use the Indian wool. I mean, we tried that in the past. We have actually approached a few organizations, and as you know that wool is a very important natural fiber for us, and we really want to have a growth agenda in natural fibers. But at the same time, what our customers and the country demands are on having the full traceability of the elements that go into our products. So we work very closely with our suppliers, and we are working very closely to develop new supply chains, new supply maps, where we can actually secure both animal welfare and the chain of custody of the materials that go in. Recently, we have started up with one of our partners in New Zealand, and we have actually we have been working with them for 2 years now. Things are going good in the right direction. We are working with a few Indian suppliers, but the work is still in progress. We are quite hopeful, and yeah, we hope to increase the more domestic wool into our products. I'm very happy to be here interacting with you all fine people, learn a bit more about the Indian supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Parag. Thank you.
Manmat, I
Uh,
forgot to greet you. Lovely to see you. Yes, go ahead, Shreya.
Yeah, Manmat, you want?
Hello.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Cool.
yes, Manmat.
Well, I am from North Karnataka. I am basically into designing of basically with the leather products and natural fibers. Of late, I started with wool and all. Dominantly, I take care of North Karnataka materials, which is cotton and jute. And other side, we have started with wool and felt materials. And primary job is into customization. From past 20-25 years, I'm into customization of leather products, leather accessories, plus leather helmets. From past 7-8 years, I've been designing helmets for Royal Enfield and another 10 to 12 companies across world. Working with natural materials and keeping a lot of things locally is my approach, as we are blessed with a lot of history behind this. I mean, that's a kind of inspiration all the way. Then this time, I mean, we tried from past, we are into home decor with wool and little of felt materials, then the accessories. Then we have used them in bags, basically, along with wooden cases and all, doing trunks and treasure cases, and packaging for liquor bottles. We are trying to use wool and cotton and little of jute in it. So this is what I do normally.
Thanks, Manmat. Good to have you here. Jen, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi. So I'm calling in from Northern California. So I'm kind of way out in left field. And about 3-4 years ago, I got a Fulbright Nehru Research Grant to study wool production in Himachal. I had been traveling to the region for a few years prior to that, just as a tourist. But so I was there for most of a year studying wool production. And I was originally kind of looking more at the craft practices. And then as my research progressed, I became really interested in actually learning more about the shepherding and the sheep breeds and the wool growing part of it as well. So that's my big focus that I have been researching for a few years. And then the last couple of years, then I've also been starting a small import business, trying to support the folks that I've been working with there. So finding some new markets for wool products that they're producing. So thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Himanshu is just joining. So Himanshu, you're there? Himanshu? Himanshu, can you hear me? You're on mute, Himanshu.
Sorry, everybody. Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay, great. We got you just in time. So our other panelists have introduced themselves. Can you quickly introduce yourself and your work?
Hi, everyone. I am Himanshu Shani, and I'm based in Delhi. We have a brand called 1111. Myself and my business partner, Mia Morikawa, we kind of lead the brand. A principle of the brand, we work with hand spinners across India. So today, 90% of our cotton is hand spun in whatever we use in our brand. We do work with wool and also silk, but which is a lesser side of the part, but we have been trying to build that whole aspect. And we've been working with various NGOs and other setups across the country to develop different design techniques, but different craft techniques, but always design is the principal head in whatever we try to do. Happy to be here and to have, discuss this thing with everyone. Would be exciting to see the outcomes in future. Thank you.
Thanks, Himanshu. Himanshu, you have also done a lot of work with the indigenous cotton. So maybe we'll also touch upon that later sometime during the discussion. Yeah. So I've also, Mira, I've tried to introduce you, but do you have anything to add?
You are?
No, Shaurya, thank you so much. It's just that Shaurya and I have been working together on this whole wool initiative with CFP. And it's been a journey of a lot of learning and meeting a lot of wonderful people. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mira. So we're hoping that Mira and I will try to initiate a conversation and we'll request the panelists to then share their thoughts on their own. We'll probably not specifically ask any panelists to start talking on something or ask specific questions. So I was thinking, Mira, we could start talking a bit about the breeds and the pastoralism and what makes our wool special. So one of the things,
I think, yes, it would be nice if that context can be given, because I think many designers look more at the natural aspect of the fiber, and while the whole context behind it would be important to also build.
Yeah, so I was just thinking that in some ways the use of indigenous wool has decreased, but the Indian wool is produced in a pastoral system which has very low carbon footprints, and wool is an extremely versatile fiber. So given both, I feel that, or rather we feel that wool is a fiber of the future, and India has amazing diversity of sheep breeds. Every breed produces a different kind of fiber, which has its own characteristics and staple length, color, and all of that. So now I think if we could, maybe Jen could also speak about, and Manmat can also get in sharing some thoughts on what makes this natural fiber special, what makes our wool special, and what are the different characteristics. So Jen, would you like to?
Sure. You mean just wool in general, or
Yeah, wool,
specifically?
and I think you had once spoken about the double coat, which I thought could be quite interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wool is an amazing fiber. It has just so many properties that, you know, chemists have been trying to replicate with all these synthetic fibers, and they can't really do everything that wool does. One thing is that it's able to absorb a lot of water without feeling wet. So that's really good for, you know, apparel use. And in fact, even when it gets wet, it starts to generate heat. So, you know, even just from your perspiration from your body, you can start to feel that your clothes are becoming warmer. It's a good insulator, both against the heat and against the cold. There's, you know, the different sheep breeds have these different characteristics of their wool. So you can have things that are very soft and that can be used, you know, next to skin wear. You have things that can be really rugged and durable and be used for outdoor uses. It's very resilient. So for example, in rugs, you know, it can get compressed when you step on it and then it will spring back, right? It has just really these amazing properties that no other fiber can do all of those things all at once. So that's just a little bit about, I mean, I love wool, so those are some reasons why. It's also actually, as a hand spinner, it's very easy to work with. It's one of the easiest fibers to work with as a spinner because it has a natural crimp to it. And it also has these surface scales that kind of cling to each other. So it kind of wants to hang together in a way that other fibers don't. And then I've been specifically working in Himachal, and in that region, there's a few sheep breeds. The parts of Himachal where I work, the native breed is called Gadi sheep. When I started working there, I was researching about the breeds and found that there had been a crossbreeding program instituted by the government in the 1970s. And so I wasn't really expecting to find any indigenous sheep around anymore. But I have, you know, once I've been spending time with the shepherds, they do have sheep that they identify as, usually they call them Desi. They don't usually use the breed name. A few do. And whether or not they're purebred or anything is one question, but they certainly there are sheep that have characteristics that I wasn't expecting to find. Namely, some of them have a double-coated fleece, meaning that the fiber has both a very long outer coat that can be, you know, in a 6-month shearing, it could be up to 8 or 9 inches long. And it's a bit coarser and, you know, pretty smooth. It doesn't have a lot of crimp. And then at the same time, there's also a shorter coat that's intermixed with it, which is about 2.5 to 3 inches long, which is much finer and much crimpier. And so that's creating then this, you know, this insulating layer close to the body of the sheep. And the outer layer then is allowing the rain to wash off so that they don't get soaking wet. And so that material then is also very useful for what the herders make out of it, which is they make these blankets and jackets, which they wear and they use when they're out herding their animals. And so it's a really wonderful material that, you know, is very well adapted to protect them in that environment where it's grown and then where it's used.
Jen, you also spoke about the crossbreeding program. Is it possible to tell us a bit more about the crossbreeding program and what kind of sort of differences the herders or you have observed between the local breeds and the crossbred sheep?
Yeah. So the cross program was introduced to get a fine wool that would be able to be used in apparel and go into kind of a more global wool commodity stream. So it There were several different breeds of sheep that were introduced and crossbred, but mainly all of the fine bred, fine wool sheep like the Merino.
Sorry, one second, Jen. Amit, can you just mute your audio? Amit?
Yes.
Amit, please mute yourself. Thanks. Yeah, Jen, please continue.
Yeah. So they tried a few different kinds of sheep, a few different varieties of Merino, Rambouillet, trying to quote unquote improve the breed, which generally means get a finer wool. And, you know, I don't know, it's not been super successful in that the wool is still not being used, you know, for apparel. It's still going mainly into rug production, the wool that is sold and not used locally. So, and then also, you know, when you're looking at breeding sheep, you can't only look at one characteristic, right? You can't only breed for the wool quality or, you know, meat production or whatever, because it's an animal, it has to live in this environment. And so there's all these other factors about how well the animals can handle the climate. They go through a lot of various different climates on their migration, all the way, you know, up to about 12,000 feet and all the way down to the plains. It's very rugged terrain, so they have to be pretty nimble. And so the crossbred sheep have had difficulties with that. They're more susceptible to disease. This is all stuff I've heard from the herders. You know, I haven't like studied that directly, but they get sick more often. When they get sick, they are more likely to die or continue to have serious illness than the indigenous breed sheep, who were better adapted to the environment.
Then I gather the crossbred sheep also sometimes find it difficult to work on those terrains and choose what to eat. And do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, that's another thing, is that the indigenous sheep, then they're smaller, so they don't eat as much, and then also they're pickier about what they eat. So you know, they have a less of an impact on the ecosystems. Then the crossbred sheep are eating more, and they're just sort of eating indiscriminately everything, and so then, you know, you have problems of overgrazing from that.
So our efforts around wool and woolen textiles have also have had a strong focus on trying to conserve the indigenous breeds, and Sushma has been a mentor to us. So can I request Sushma to share some thoughts on why the indigenous breeds are important, and what kind of things we might need to do to conserve these breeds? Sushma, there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, Sushma, yes.
Yeah. I think Jen already gave us a little glimpse into that. Just to add to what Jen was saying, I think when we say, I just want to kind of lay what the concerns are or what the challenges are really before all of us who are trying to revitalize the indigenous wool value chains and indigenous wool and the fiber in our everyday life. You know, so when we say indigenous breed, I think in the Himalayan context, there's a very strong background of the last 4-5 decades where the merinos from outside were bred together with the local desis. But, you know, in the other regions, in the plains, we find a lot of the indigenous as those which are native to their specific ecosystems. And what the shepherds have done, because of various factors, which probably we don't have time to go into here, that they have bred...
Sound problem.
Can you hear? Yeah. Where there has been interbreeding with breeds which are outside their own native ecosystems, but they continue to be indigenous breeds. So, for instance, in Gujarat and Kutch, there has been a lot of breeding. The shepherds have moved from the Patanwadi to the Marwadi, which also was an interbreed with a Rajasthani breed, to breeds which they got in from Madhya Pradesh. while they were migrating. And a lot of this has happened with the entire meat and the export of meat having taken off in a big way, which has led to, it's a combination of a lot of focus on the meat economy and on the fact of them losing their access to forage. So a combination of that has led to a lot of adaptation where they have bred two different indigenous breeds and brought them into a native region, therefore making them in a sense not very not very sustainable or resilient to disease. They eat much more. There are various issues in that. When we look at reviving the natural fibers, I myself sometimes keep questioning this, that on the one hand, when we say indigenous, we are talking about the natives. So for instance, let's say in Kutch, it would be the Patanwadi. In the Deccan, there are many, many different kinds of indigenous Deccani breeds. Now, but here the pastoralists have already interbred with Marwadi, with Gari, with Bharadi. Now all of them have wool. And all of them are struggling with the fact that there is no takeoff on the fiber. So while one creates a niche and an entire process of conserving the native breed and therefore creating a market for their wool also, I wouldn't want to exclude the other breeds that are existing in the ecosystem today. And have come in the last 20 years, because there is an economy there too, which is waiting to be revitalized with the wool. So, and sometimes if we just talk of the very native breed and only that wool, that really is a very, very small percentage of shepherds who have continued to conserve that very native breed. While there are many more shepherds who are continuing shepherding by having adapted to different to the mixing of breeds by taking on from different regions. So I think when we say indigenous, we need to be a little clear whether we are talking of indigenous as India or indigenous as really native to the ecosystem. And I think we should really be telescoping both, because when we look at the sheepfold economy, it would cover really the entire spectrum.
Thanks, Sushma. That was quite comprehensive. Does any of our other panelists want to share some thoughts on the breeds and on sheep pastoralism in general? Shumita, you want to come in?
May I add 1 or 2 points about
Yes.
the breed?
Yes, sure. Hello, Sadhana sir. Hello.
Very good morning. Regarding the breeds, I am hearing some very important points here that crossbreeding somewhere is troubling. Basically, if the breeds which are joining, as Sushma has just said, the adjoining area breeds join, and the shepherds are clever enough that small difference of breeds is acceptable to them, because that due to that small difference, adjustment to the environment is much easier, and shepherds know to take the benefit of the other breed which has been brought into their herds, has some important trait which they want to get in their own flocks, right? But if the breeds which the two breeds that are joining, one is really from a far off place, like maybe from temperate areas or Rambole as they are saying, then mixing them is a bigger difficulty and generally doesn't happen. Like in Deccan also, in Deccan, several outside India breeds were used for crossing, and that has gradually shown us that has in fact literally failed. So we do not gain anything out of that. If that breeds are really far apart, what we normally say that if it is crossbreeding, it doesn't succeed. But if it is outcrossing is little a mild type of crossing where the breeds from adjoining regions, which in the same sort of a bigger climate. If you see the macroclimate, it will be similar. But if you see microclimate for the on breed, that is a smaller area. So little level of outcrossing the farmers do themselves. They breed very appropriately. They know how to breed them and what to look for the traits in their progeny and continue with them. I appreciate the points being presented here, but I only want to say that outcrossing generally helps, whereas crossbreeding more often doesn't help. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadama sir. And I think
Shaurya,
from
can I? Yeah, sorry.
sure, yeah, Meera, please.
Yeah. So while we are still on the whole, we're talking at the breed level and the whole system of pastoralism, so to speak. We are not so much talking about the fiber yet. I thought I'd just flag one question with some of the panelists and also some of the experts sitting in the audience, is that if, as we have understood even through the study and as has been said here, that if we're looking at pastoralism as a system of which wool is a byproduct. Now within that, herders make certain choices which are related to the environment, their survival strategies, coping mechanisms, and so on. So if one is talking about, just desi un, one is singling out the indigenous wool as a factor which can help towards conservation of more suitable breeds for herders. To what extent is this factor going to really come into play? Because from what we've understood, there has been a very rich repertoire, historical repertoire of how herders have worked with techniques and the wool as a byproduct, as something for their own consumption. Beyond that, yes, it has moved into a trade economy where 80% of our wool at one time, more than 80% perhaps, was being exported, and it was primarily for home textiles and carpets. But the reasons for that economy now failing is something else. We'll come to that later. But if, say, the predominant vibrant use of the desi un earlier was limited to the community's engagement with it, then to what, and they knew how to work with that wool. They even separated breeds which were more suitable for the wool and kept it for their home consumption. How does one now actually think or perceive wool as playing a very critical part in the conservation efforts that we... Sushma, would you like to take that question, or anybody from the panelists also?
I can come in. Sushma maybe wants to.
No, I would like to take the question, but I really would like to listen to the other panelists.
Yeah, so hello, I'd like to come in here. Although, my experience has not been so much about the purebred sheep, or in that sense, indigenous, of course, because actually our association with wool started in 1987. When Bikaner and Urmul, where I was working with then, Bikaner faced the worst drought of the century. And although we were not working with spinners or weavers, but we realized that we needed to look at alternate ways of drought-proofing the economy. And one of the things that after we did a survey, we found out that most of the women in all the villages that we worked in Loon Karansar, most of the women owned charkhas. Because they were given it by either as dahez, actually as dowry, or by the Khadi organizations. The local Khadi organization in Bikaner were very strong. And the local Khadi organizations had introduced the spinning for women, and of course weaving. So when we initially started working, it was to provide sort of drought relief work for the women in that area, as opposed to, doing work on the building roads in the heat, which the government normally did. Famine relief work was like really in the hot sun. So this was something that women were very keen, and they picked up. They knew how to spin the local fiber. They picked it up also. They did various counts. And then we came across the weavers of Falodi, Urmul weavers as they're called now. And they were weaving these beautiful pattus, which were initially made out of local wool. And the local wool in Bikaner is from the Chokla breed, which to my little understanding is still very much pure breed. I'm not sure how much they have crossbred because they are in one, Bikaner is one corner of the country, and after the border came up, they haven't been able to migrate much. So in that sense, the pattu that was woven and which was really a piece of to aspire for, I have one. So this pattu was actually given woven, hand spun and then hand woven locally. And it was given to a man when he got married. It was such an important, that was the, it wasn't a silk sherwani, but it was a woolen pattu, which sort of doubled up as a blanket, because they were woven in those tiny pitlooms, and then two of them were joined together. And so initially that was our initial foray into working with wool, hand spinning and hand weaving. And then gradually, sadly, actually, that whole thing got a bit diverted when in Urmul itself, because as we tried to make it more commercial, we realized that there is a less of a demand for woolen products. We did make initially a lot of home furnishing. We tried to make some garments, but garments in with that wool didn't work very well, obviously. And then in the Indian market, because the demand for wool is less in terms of whether it is home furnishing or we did try blankets. And I can see Aloka here somewhere in this group as a participant. I don't know if she remembers, but Prerna is also here, but this was before Prerna's time. We did try making hand-spun, hand-woven, local natural blankets. And they were so warm. They were amazingly warm. And the only thing is that it was difficult to sort of commercialize it and make it sell in the market. And gradually, sadly, both Urmul and even later on in Rangsutra, our focus went away from wool to cotton, because that was the fiber which was more, predominant. But this whole experience with living with Desi Oon and the project that we did, Sushma and Meera, with Sahajivan and Urmul, it has really, it's made us realize that there is really a potential. And although, it's not worked very well in some parts, but I was happy to hear Shaurya and Jen say that it's the fiber of the future. Because, with cotton also, we've had so many problems, and what it's done to the environment, etc., and how much water it takes up when you grow cotton and use cotton. So in that sense, I feel that during our project also, as you said, someone mentioned, I think Jen mentioned, how the spinner, it's an easier fabric to spin. So it's an easier yarn to spin, like fiber to spin. And in this project with Sahajivan, again, the spinning part of it got revived very easily, because the women had those skills. It's just that they were not spinning much because lack of demand. So the spinners and of course the shepherds whom we worked with. And here's one thing that I feel that we have experimented on, and I can't see Partho here who works with us, but we kind of worked on right from the beginning in the project with Sahajivan, in the sense of, right from creating tubs in which the farmers, the shepherds could clean the sheep first. And we used a mild, shampoo, with Rita and some other things, mild, not like heavy chemical or anything. And those sheep were bathed first, and the fleece that came out, the wool was cleaner and softer, and it commanded a better price, because it could be segregated also, the softer wool from the wool, which I was shocked to hear that 80% is discarded. I mean, that's really a shock. I'm sure we could do felting with those. You know, this is something that comes to my mind, that if it's not wool that can be carded and spun, we could certainly think of doing felting, because it's a shame if 80% is being discarded. So, yeah, so I think that I feel that there's a lot of potential, and I'm excited to go ahead on this journey. That's for now.
So Shumita, again, my understanding is that yes, the discarding of the wool means that the herder doesn't get that income, but it's not like thrown away from what I've understood. In many places, it's kind of scattered over fields, and the wool becomes like a kind of a fertilizer, so to speak. So yeah, but Shaurya, please correct me on this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Meera. So Meera, I was thinking maybe also you can speak a little bit about the biofertilizer and the insulation efforts that CFP is trying to make.
Yeah, I think, we kind of, it's almost 11:45. Let's come to the other panelists also. I'd like to talk to Himanshu and Manmat and Parag, especially since, this webinar is about how are we going to, make Desi Un, more acceptable in a broad-based sort of way. So can I come to you, Himanshu? If you can share your thoughts with us, that what is it that excites you about this fiber, and what are the challenges that you have found because now the whole sort of focus has changed from local communities working with it to you taking it to a very high-end market. So what has been this process of working with the wool, and did you had to deal with it? Did you have to deal with it differently, and how do you see taking it forward?
I think the whole journey of understanding the fiber and going all the way to the level of the pasture level or the shepherd level of understanding the sheep and the breed became very important, because as a designer, we never participate in understanding where it comes from and what is the reality, why the yarn is a coarser and XYZ, all other aspects which one understands. How Jane was explaining that there are different double coatings where there are different kind of yarns which one can make from different fiber lengths which you get out of it. Understanding that is when then the design input kind of was getting more clearer, and how we can utilize it and what we can make out of it. There were various washing aspects which we have done on it, apart from creating a design and a product, to kind of treating that wool in a different way in terms of felting, in terms of combing in a certain way. We've been experimenting in terms of jugalbandis of different craft techniques using that wools, which is after the fiber is converted into yarn and made into a fabric. We like to blend different kind of crafts and see what is the outcome coming. So these are the experiments which we do. It is still a long way, I would say. We haven't yet cracked it, but we are getting a response to a certain developments which we have done. So one is we are doing a different kind of a wash and a feel to it, which is giving a different hand feel to the entire product. We do a lot of washing even at the garment level rather than even at the fabric level. So we play with the shrinkage aspects of it. Still, the Desi wool, particularly the one which I work with, the one in Rajasthan and in Kutch, which is more at the coastal level. But the moment we're doing more in the northern side, more higher altitude, which are still better for the garment side. But the one from the Rajasthan and Kutch, the Desi wools which we have worked with, it is more accepted at the home furnishing side. After treating it in different way, yes, it has got a very good some response. People really like the texture. People really, dive into it when they see it. The issue comes is when it touches the skin, and how can one play with it. That's where the design input comes and how we can use it and do it. So that's some exploration which we're still doing it. But what I've realized that there is a lot of work which is required at the segregation process. and where I feel that easily the 50% of the quality of the wool can get better. And in that segregation, different product aspect can be done. And these issues are coming because we don't have a fully integrated systems. We don't have places where these can happen. And that is somewhere I'm more trying to now look into if this kind of system can be implied, and then we can get a better quality which can be then used in the right way, and then the outcome can be it can be consistent. Otherwise we lose the market and the client, because these are hand done products. This cannot be cheap. It cannot be cheap, otherwise nobody will get their values of the effort one is putting in. So it will always get more expensive with time. So how can we actually improve that quality would be with something which I would look into it.
So then you should definitely start working with Shumita at Rangsutra, because they have exactly begun this whole segregation and washing process. So I'll go to Manmat now. So Manmat, given that most of our wool, almost 80%, is from the arid and semi-arid zones, and therefore it has a certain structure and composition that constitutes it being perceived as rough and coarse. Do you think then that the treatment of the wool for an urban market or a different market does it then really make sense to take it into something that's not in its nature, like say for example apparel, which requires to be smooth and soft to the touch of the skin, or even the bags, for example, that you made for the exhibition recently? The response for that with some of the people who bought it was also that it was very pokey. It was poking us through even the textile. So what would be your take on this? How do you propose to approach working with Desio?
Well, the first thing is about the fiber. What I've understood is, it's got its own, challenges along with its own character. As Himanshu mentioned, there has to be a lot of research and developments done on that side to develop a beautiful product, or out of the box product. Now the wool what we have in this region is primarily it's a coarse wool which needs a lot of treatment. Then what we understood is the approach here is, along with the fiber, the community and the livelihood involved here. So that took me, that was quite interesting. Our primary products were basically carpets and quilts. Then I thought, let me explore in a parallel way where we can have a better price. That way we can connect to the community in a bigger size. And developing a product in a village or with the villagers or with the shepherds involves a lot of, holding hands like things, where we can, one will be developing felt, then other one will be developing the wool in different levels. As you said, on a technical side, it's got its own challenges, which is, it's little pokey and all. We are working on that with, again, real organic treatments. And this time we have developed one, we have used light cotton material, which is infused from inside. And from outside, we try to do, again, organic treatment, but keeping it natural, hammering and all done. And we try to give it a soft wash, which means around 60 to 70% of corrections has been taken care. But what I feel is there is an amazing, wool being, it's got its own character, which is, like everlasting effect. And it's a cool, whatever you develop with the wool, it's like a kind of, vintage or a colonial, it's everlasting styling material wise. Then the scope is amazing where we need to work really. The little of R&D is needed on the technical side where we develop the material. Once that is developed, I think the young minds can come and work, take it to the parallel side. This side, apart from the quilts and the carpets, why? Because the climate is not so favorable. The challenge is to develop something else or getting out something, a global market or a different approach. Like what we are trying is, we are trying to develop a packaging material basically for high-end liquor bottles and all. We want to work with a wool where, like you need to understand the requirement, like there, this pokey issue will not be a challenge. It's used for a packaging material where, like both the sides, it's a kind of win-win situation. Their requirement that, the packaging wise, the requirement is different. It has to be, like fragile products to be taken care and all. That keeps a lot of organic and with little of leathers, and that again a local leather using on the corners and all. We can strengthen the product, and the labeling becomes easy. Then maybe, like we can use the leather as a fasteners on the sides and all. So, it's pure R&D. I think by another 6 months, we'll be coming out with a very interesting line of products in this.
Okay, that sounds very, very interesting, and look forward to that. Maybe we should have like a guild of wool designers or something, so there can be a lot of cross-learning between everybody.
Yeah, primarily here in, this part of the world, the challenge is, like study materials or reference materials. Why? Because we have been not very good in documenting things.
Right. Right.
So now it's a kind of first-hand experience, which needs a lot of learning. And here I'm very much exposed to you people, so that, so that I can keep involving you or bothering you for a lot of reasons now.
Okay, we welcome your botherations. Yes.
Yeah, just to add to the last point Manmath made on packaging material, I just wanted to share, many of you might be aware that in UK, they have really started using this for a lot of material which is packaged and sent, especially frozen foods. And they have started discarding plastics and started using wool as packaging material. Also, going back to your excellent question, Meera, earlier, there are three things. There are just some broad reflections. It was very interesting in Pune, in Maharashtra. I came across this felter, this group of felters who, because there in the local bazaars, they're felted, their felts, the jans, mattresses, they really sell it, and it really gets consumed in the local markets, and it has consistently got sold in the local markets because people there, the communities and the shepherds and even neighboring communities believe that felted mattresses are really very good for the back. So I asked him, I said, has this understanding expanded to urban areas? And he said, hum to roz cycle pe, we take it, sorry, there are a few people who don't know Hindi, that we take it on our cycles, or in our, one of them takes in a vehicle. And he says, every day I manage to sell 20 to 30 felt mattresses in Pune, in the city. And he said, we tied up with a few medical professionals who started expanding this understanding in the urban markets that felt mattresses is good for the back. Mm-hmm. So, this is very interesting, where you take the local, exactly the local product, and you create an understanding which is not marketing, it's really education. It's like now confronted with the fear of death through COVID, everybody has started drinking kada, even if they don't like it, like the bitter taste of it, right? Okay. So the fact is, I think there are three aspects to really start taking it into and mainstreaming this. One is the political economy itself. Just as in the 80s, it was a huge state subsidies which shifted, from natural fibers to man-made fibers. So there's a lot of policy that has to be done. Just design and marketing is not going to help expand this. One will have to start shifting the policy to ensure that there is infusion of subsidy for natural fibers like this. The second is to exactly like this felter and the medical person, or like somebody else I met in Vidarbha, who had tied up with a medical professional who had been telling their patients that sheep ghee is very good for the knees and for arthritis, and there is a huge takeoff for that in that region. So this kind of large scale behavioral shifts and education is required. Then comes the issue of design and marketing. And I think there the kind of work Himanshu is doing, the kind of work all the groups are also working on, the lovely products that Gopi and Manmat came out together recently, these really kind of showcase the quality, the character, and the beauty of the fiber. And so even if there may be a niche market, it really highlights that completely. And one local products like packaging, like mattresses, which may not be heavily crafted, but which can consume a lot of the wool. We are here talking of such a huge number of sheep, and so if we start getting into really very niche, that is also required, but we also require to mainstream. And I think what Shumita said, I completely agree with her, that felting has such a huge potential, because unlike weaving, for instance. So while of course there is weaving and knitting, but I think felt really has a huge potential, not only for crafted products, but for insulation material, apart from of course the wool going straight into biofertilizers, all of which we are trying to work on. But I think insulation material is a huge area of work. And even for home furnishings. And since we have been talking of mattresses, I wonder what Parag has to say. I'm curious.
Yeah, thank you, Sushma. That was a very, very good perspective you've given. And actually, it brings me to the question I was going to ask Parag, which you're absolutely right, that there has to be a policy shift for behavioral change to happen. And I remember, because I was involved with my father's business, which was with, woolen carpets. And there was a boom. Europe and America and all the countries were buying in large numbers because there were, there were tariffs and custom levies that had been inbuilt into buying products from India, which resulted in this sort of woolen carpet boom in the northern parts. So Parag, I wanted to ask you that, we began with Himanshu, who believes that, if you have to factor in, fair compensation to say the producers in a wool economy, then he tends to move towards a high-end market. But like we said, that the problem, I mean, the situation demands a much more a much more nuanced response, which has to address different aspects. I mean, from high-end to how does one actually transform and make it viable for the herders to get the compensation out of their occupations. So given that IKEA is in the business of mainstreaming handmade products, how do you see taking Desi Un forward? And what do you think could be a possible way to do this?
Thanks, Mira. Basically, I would like to start with saying that, yes, we are not into high-end IKEA. We are for the many people. The products we make are for the many people, and our main intent here is so that many people can afford our rugs. And I think a lot has been discussed on the on the designer and high-end markets. Let me bring in the perspective from the common man perspective. First of all, let me start with what is available. I mean, I'll start with what we have right now in India versus what we are trying to build. We have a lot of coarse wool, which I understand from Bikaner, and that may not be, that may or may not fit the garments profile, but it fits beautifully into the carpet agenda. We love coarse wool, actually. We want coarse wool. We use coarse wool in carpets. And the fact is that we need to capitalize on the strengths. I mean, I am very saddened to hear that we, we maybe give away or throw away 80% of our produce. Fortunately, unfortunately, what has happened is, I think since we have not been organized in our supply structure, I mean, then I come to the farmers. I'll come to the sheep herders or the producers of the wool. I think what has happened over the years is, yes, there has been a increase or a boom in the way that we are looking at woolen products and our carpets. And what has happened in the meantime is due to the intermixing of breeds, and then we were not able to compensate the farmers. I think their interest in selling wool to the next, let's say the spinners or the peon has actually gone away. They are maybe, our little research has informed us that, they are more about getting into the meat production rather than, organizing wool as an industry, because we don't have, organized structures to, collate or collect the wool. Unlike New Zealand, where we have farms which have 5,000, 6,000 sheep, it makes sense for those farmers or farms to, collect the wool and then ship it out. Unfortunately, here our farm size, a typical farmer may have, a rich farmer may have 50 sheep maybe, or 100 sheep. I mean, that is the size of the sheep. And here it is important that we capitalize on what good we have. We create a structure where the farmers can go in to the market and get a right compensation for the products. Else they will not, come in. This industry will not progress. And what is happening right now, we are dependent a lot on imports. We would like to use the Indian wool. I mean, that fits beautifully into our products. This is coarse wool. This has hollow fibers, increases the bounce, and that is what we'll need in carpets. Here, I think one of the ways, what I believe is that, organizations like, organizations can support, building a structure or, structure around which the farmers can actually sell their produce. And at the same time, of course, I mentioned that compensation is an important part of the farmer. From the farmer, we expect the segregation to happen at the right pace. Otherwise, what happens is the cost of operations keeps on adding at each and every level. At one point of time, I heard an example, wherein we were using wool, but we had to shift away to cotton. We have to analyze what has happened. Why could not we, why couldn't we keep the wool prices at an optimal level? This is what happens. We don't segregate. Like cotton is a more organized industry than wool. That is the reason we have, cotton at much lower prices. Wool by its very nature, because of mixing that is happening, we are not able to get the pure breeds, but that is okay as long as we don't destroy or we don't, in trying to, create a structure of more finer wools, we don't destroy the indigenous breeds which we should capitalize on. Lastly, yes, I do agree on the points that there should be a structure where handcrafts can be promoted. Yes, the drawbacks have been are being withdrawn slowly. That is all right. I mean, I would say that is a bottleneck for us. That is a good to have. I mean, that it actually encourages the industry, but it is not necessary that we have to rely on government drawbacks to support. I mean, it's time. The time has come for us or this industry to take a step forward instead of always relying on subsidies. I think this industry can stand on its own. I mean, it really doesn't need a subsidy to grow. I mean, there is a lot of potential to be done, yes, but yes, there should be an interest from both parties, from buyers at the same time of sellers, to promote this material in a way that we can actually, let's say, consistency of the quality that we need, at the same time consistency of the volumes that come in year on year.
Thanks, Parag. Actually, what you said also reminds me of a conversation we had with Jaipur Rugs, who also mentioned something very similar, that they are very committed to working with Desi Oon, but they just are not able to find the quality that they now require. And there are many reasons. They feel that the wool has lost its luster. There's a lot more burr and dirt in the wool. Segregation is not happening. But then this is also connected with many other reasons that we spoke about, which is policy, support, reasons why, as herders are not getting the kind of, remuneration that they should. They are also not interested then in cultivating the wool quality. Pasture qualities have gone down, which has affected the wool. I mean, there are a number of reasons. So it is really, it is a complex situation for sure. I'm going to ask Prerna. Prerna wants to add something from the audience. Prerna, would you like to say something?
Yeah, hi Meera. Hello everyone. I've been hearing the conversations. I'm not an expert on wool, and we've just recently started working on the woolen value chain. However, pastoralism has been a very important aspect on which Urmul has been working for the past 2 years. And a lot of problems which were being mentioned by Himanshu and other people also, that it's the basic problem lies at the back end. When we, even after our meeting in Ahmedabad, when we went back into the field and we realized that the basic problem lies in the ecosystem available for the pastoralists for being able to tap into the wool market. And for that, we started mapping the some key pastoral routes right from Jaisalmer to Lunkaransar, and we identified 3 critical spots on those pastoral routes, and we have started developing CFCs, common facility centers, on those points, which could become organized and important resting as well as collection points for these pastoralists. So we could have proper technology and even nutrition factors available for these sheep and other animals as well, so that we could collect the wool, segregate it right there and then, and there are proper technologies and setups available for proper fiber production. So that is something that Urmul has been working on for the past 2 years. And we have, with the help of NARA and FAO, we are trying to take it at the policy level also. And we are trying to build these common centers which could actually facilitate these pastoralists and sheep herders for their identity also, and for their safety, for helping them rest. Otherwise they rest in random places in open. It could be a very important point. With the help of hydroponics, we are trying to add nutrition for the animals also at those centers, and it could be it could play a very important role in this value chain, in organizing this value chain.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it just goes to show that sometimes just very little kind of planning, just a little bit of intelligent planning can actually work around the problem or make, come up with very simple solutions.
Right.
So I think it's 12:11 now. Shaurya, would you like to say anything, or do we just open it out for a general question answer? Would people like to continue, or do we end it here?
Yeah, I think if we open it out and some members of the audience, I see a lot of people here. If they have any questions or something to add.
There's one thing I wanted to add, if I can.
Yeah, sure.
We were, the whole, the point of one is that the higher end market where we're getting the value and trying to pay the cost, what it takes. But as there is a various kind of grades of qualities of fiber which we get, and it has all different market segments where it will be used. And that's what should be planned based on how the segregation process is what we've been discussing. So one is talking from the packaging, one is talking from the felting, from the rug side, from the garment side. And many of these sheep has a quality to even go to the garment, might be the percentage from the quantity would be lesser. So that segregation process will help. There's one other thing which we have been working as a brand is that we're trying to see how the hand spun yarn gets a more value also, because eventually this hand spinning goes into a weaving, and then the product is finally either a garment is made or it gets into a carpet making. Which is only a two-step thing, a spinner and a weaver. But in a garment, there are many people gets part of it, the stitcher and the tailor and all. So the spinner kind of gets a very lesser end of the value in terms of the earning also. And where we've been trying to explore like how the wool has been used a lot in the knitting side of it. And how a community across the globe get an access to the hand spun yarn directly for knitting. And there is a huge market of a mill spun yarn, which has been sold across the globe, and there is nothing an indigenous hand spun yarn available anywhere. So yeah, I mean, these were some thoughts which I wanted to just share to it.
Yeah, Shumita, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to say that I think there is, scope to do everything, like the various things. For example, I agree with Sushma that work needs to be done at the policy level, but I also agree with Pradyut that a lot can be done by the people themselves. For example, this project, a very small project, it was a small project that we did in Rajasar with Urmul Setu. So these tubs, these bath tubs, I call them, that we built, just 3 bath tubs. In the last year, 12,000 sheep were cleaned in those. So, and and out of those 12,000, about 4,000 were from the 3 neighboring villages of that panchayat, and the others were from little far off villages, like what Prerna was talking, that people bring their sheep and they have a particular kind of a route for when they migrate. So the remaining 8,000 were from other villages, and they came there and they got their sheep bathed there in those tubs. And just from that one activity and the sorting, the farmer, the shepherd, increased his payment, his income by 15%, 15, just by this small thing of cleaning and sorting. So I agree, that we can do quite a lot at our own level by organizing, by providing the necessary technical expertise that we have all been discussing in this program, in this talk today, and by making available some basic infrastructure. That is, I also agree with Sushma, that is the more important thing. And then yes, design and marketing does come, but what we call product development, where we are really working down the supply chain, not so much in the front end, like, that is needed. But I think there's a space for like Prerna was talking, how Urmul is trying to do this, what has been done in Rajasar in many other parts also, so that can be a kind of ashram for the sheep, which are the shepherds and the sheep which are going, walking across the country from south up towards the north. So I certainly think there's a lot. And Pradyut, I'm very keen to that we can link up with you. We are not working with wool now with IKEA, but I think there's tremendous possibility, especially in Western Rajasthan, in Karnataka, because already Manmat and Gopi have done some amazing work there from northern Karnataka, Kutch also, I'm sure, and Western Rajasthan. What we have more than the number of sheep that Australia and New Zealand have, I think. So if 12,000 sheep just bathed in that one village tubs that we made, there are so many more sheep that could avail of these facilities. That's what. Thanks.
Meera?
Yeah, are there any other questions? Anyone would like to say something from the audience?
Meera, I have a question for the audience.
Okay, go ahead.
Meera?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
For everybody here and including the panelists, this, the whole issue of moth treatment. Even with finished products. And we all remember that even as children, we used to use the blankets from the desi wool, or even our sweaters and the knitted sweaters. And it would always, after a couple of years, slowly start developing, and you always had to take care of it, which was very nice. And that somehow has gone out of the understanding, the knowledge system, the practice. It's gone out of public imagination that you actually take care of your desi own apparels or blankets, and I suspect this is going to be an issue when you hit the market. So what are the experiences all of you have? How would you look at it from the source end, in terms of the understanding? I know that a lot of the government wool corporations and a lot of people having worked there have a lot of deep knowledge. It's not getting used. But there may be more contemporary ways in which one looks at this. So it would be nice to hear everybody, including Manmat and even Parag. I can see Gopi here too. It will be nice to hear him also on this.
Yeah, I have a couple of points to say. One, I think let us be very clear that we mostly have a carpet grade wool and it is all coarse. So a small percentage of lamb wool could be used for garment or coats or things like that. Okay, so basically it's a kind of a carpet grade kind of a wool which is mostly available. I think one of the problems today is we are getting a lot of imported shoddy yarn. I think there the problem has come. Earlier from North Karnataka region, we used to send about 8 goods train loads to Panipat. Because we had police and military orders, there was a huge demand every year. Twice in a year, we used to send about 8 goods train, that is about 20-30 goods compartments multiplied by 8 times kind of a thing. So now nothing is going to Panipat from here because we are importing all that shoddy yarn, and also they are getting old woolen clothes imported, and they are shredded and they are mixed into it, and yarn is being produced. So somewhere I think we should address this question of how the government should stop using that, importing the junk from the West. And then it is very unfortunate. Today I get people from Rajasthan who are coming and selling those blankets in Karnataka in all the villages. So one. And second point is, I think one of the key elements of breeding our pastoralists have looked at was always the walking ability. So that's why, and considering the climate and things like that, our sheep will remain for meat. I think wool would be a very small, this one, because hardly we get in our region about 1.5 kg of wool, but sharing it twice, kind of a thing. So, and there's a huge local market culturally which has been created, like for kambalis and things like you mentioned about the jaan. The jaan is a kind of a thing which is given in Karnataka, Maharashtra borders during the weddings and things like that. So now, I'm sure there's a local good market that companies and for jaans can be done. And also today Elsa had sent a message saying that she is also looking at how to use that local wool for packaging her milk bottles for transport and things like that. I think the one way we could use all this wool which is available in this region is, one is felting, partly hand felting and machine felting. because the quantities or volumes are huge. And if we can come out with a strategy where for medium and small scale industries, with smaller appropriate technology, if we can felt wool, and then we can really create a big employment in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopi. Pleasure to hear you as always. I think there's somebody else, Anita, who would like to say something. Yeah.
I was just reading Sushma's response to my question. My name is Anita. I work with the Bakarwals, the Gujars and Bakarwals in Kashmir. And frankly, I don't really know too much about the woolen aspect of pastoralism. So I'm mainly here to learn from all of you, and also to learn as to how we could say perhaps, include remote pastoralists like the Bakarwals, who end up selling their wool to the nearest market or the nearest village where they have buyers. So how could we include remote pastoralists? My concern, of course, is specifically on Kashmir. And Sushma indicates that Sumita would have more to say on this. So I'd love to hear from Sumita. Thank you so much.
Hi, Anita. So recently we've been working in a district called Bandipora in Jammu and Kashmir, and on working with handloom weavers. And we've been trying to understand the wool supply chain, all woolen products. And while we have identified Pashmina wool, which we can source from Ladakh directly from the shepherds cooperatives, this is very interesting to hear that from the Bakarwal community, we could definitely tie up and see how we can source wool and link up that. Maybe it could be, we'd have to sort of organize them into a cooperative society or something, so that they can then sell their wool to the Bandipora. There are spinners there. There are many spinners, in case you don't have spinners in Jammu, in Bakarwal region. But there are spinners in Bandipora and in Srinagar, around Srinagar in Kashmir. And weavers, of course, there are many. So one could definitely, it would be good to connect.
Thank you so much. Could I just quickly add that the Bakarwals and Gujars have incredible embroidery skills that are not exploited as much as they could be. And they also work with leather. They make saddles, all kinds of belts, these bags in which they can carry ghee, waterproof bags, all sorts of other things with leather. Thanks a lot. And I think, if I could get your email, maybe perhaps we could communicate on this more separately. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you. I think what seems almost, there seem to be many cross possibilities and collaborations already from the talks that have been happening. So Jen is going to import yarn for knitters from Himanshu, and Himanshu is going to work with Shumita. Anita is going to work with Sushma. So and Shumita is going to work with Pradyut. So a lot of collaborations already seem to be possible. Shaurya, would you like to sum up the webinar, or are we still continuing with the discussions? Is anybody still?
I think maybe we should, if anyone has a question.
Sure.
Yes.
A very lovely body of knowledge has been, it has come up here in this discussion. And there's a lot of many things, many possibilities also coming up, like the use of wool and fiber in different respects, like even packaging and more as insulators, etc. But more in the world now, now they need breed-specific yarn. This is finding more demand. Probably its consistency which is giving the benefits to the people who are processing, developing, or industrial use of it. That consistency will be there when the yarn is from a specific breed. And that is something which we are presently in the country a bit of losing because of mixing, because of less care, because of less income to the pastoralists for doing all this. So definitely this entire working which is happening here, all your discussions about, I wish that there are more of what Urmul has put up as CFCs, the common facility centers in the route where the pastoralists are going every year or seasonally. So that kind of aspects, and there the good body of knowledge, like you are telling, it's a washing of the sheep before you take the wool, and then it's grading, its separations. I think these things, as soon as it becomes a common knowledge, that's what I wish. As soon as it becomes a common knowledge, it will be of a great use to the whole of the country for that matter. But breed specific yarn should be one important yardstick, and that will happen when our breeds, their purity is somehow maintained. And that's, I think, one important aspect. Thank you very much. I'm really happy. I'm happy to get a lovely body of knowledge from this discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sadhana sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Meera, I was thinking maybe Manmath has something to add. Manmath?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of learning, and I wait for collaborations. I'm thinking of working basically on the R&D part of the wool, then coming up with the products, which is, on a different wavelength, which may not be a blanket or a quilt or a traditional age-old, definitely age-old skills and methods, but putting them in a different platform. Like we talked about the bottling products and few other things. I think this is a good learning. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Manmath.
you. Yeah. Okay, shall we close today's session then?
Yeah, so I was just thinking that, we could just very briefly touch upon things like policy or traditional skills or the logistics of connecting it to a larger market. I was just thinking maybe if it makes sense, we could go on and at a later point in time ask time for some of our panelists and have follow-up conversations where we deep dive into specific topics. And thank you to everyone who has joined. There has been about 30 of us who were listening in, and they've constantly been being a patient ear to the discussions. And yeah, so I think that's all from me. Meera, you have something to add?
No, I think it's been really a very productive conversation. There has been a lot of new perspectives and learning, and mostly I'm excited about the possibility of all these collaborations. And I agree, I think we need to keep these dialogues going and build the understanding and perspectives and foster and nurture each other in the work that we are doing. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the panelists, and we'll take this forward. Let's see what Shaurya comes up with, the new plans for the next webinars.
Thank you, Meera. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaurya.
Thank you, Sushma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parag.
Thank you.
Manmath.
Maybe we should start something like a whole exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Himanshu.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Smita. Bye, Jen.
Bye, Jen. Bye.